Transition for Asia and Oceania. Can I ask you to please introduce yourselves in the chat box just briefly, and be sure to select to send to everyone. So welcome to the first season of Creation Webinar, A Jubilee for the Earth, A Just Transition for Asia and Oceania. My name is Anne-Marie O'Byrne. I'm a Sister of Mercy living in Bathurst, New South Wales. I'm currently a PhD candidate, and this area is the topic of my research. So I'm excited and honoured to be here with you today. I completed the Laudato Si Animators course recently and have been very impressed with GCCM and all of the work and the initiatives they are doing. I am one of the webinar moderators today, and my role is simply to facilitate each step of the way. So hopefully I won't get too lost. There has been much work in the background getting ready for this, especially by Cheryl Dugan and her team, and we thank her for getting things ready to this moment. Before we start, we would like to let you know that this webinar will be translated simultaneously into several languages. So we're speaking in English, but there will also be Spanish available, Portuguese, Italian, Polish, and French. For those requiring some reason. So I'm catching up. So for those requiring a translation, click on the interpretation icon, that's the globe at the bottom of the screen, your screen, and choose the language that you wish. So for Spanish, click Spanish. For Portuguese, click Portuguese. For French, click French. For Italian, now hold this, click Japanese. And if you want Polish, you need to click Russian. This is a little quirk of Zoom, and GCCM has done a wonderful job in hosting all of these languages. But for Italian, click Japanese, and for Polish, click Russian. Everyone else, click the one that you want. Once you've selected your language, you can see the icon at the bottom of the screen in the language that you've selected. Also note that this is a webinar and not a normal Zoom meeting. So all your microphones have been muted and will stay that way throughout our time together. Please use the chat box for questions and comments, and these will be monitored by Cheryl and others, and who will do their best to make sure that your questions are presented at the appropriate time, and they will be there as a record if there is no time to address them in this webinar. So I would like to invite Dr. Anne Paulina.
And I'm very sorry, I've just received news from Dr. Anne Paulina. There was a fire in the town, near the town where she was going into to present with us. So I might just acknowledge the land,
Thank you,
the
Dr.
sea, and the people of Asia, Oceania, the great diversity of people across the lands, connected by the seas, the beautiful plants and animals in this biodiverse region biome that's unique with Oceania, the reefs, and Asia with all of its diversity, peoples, cultures, freshwater, saltwater country. We acknowledge the traditional First Nations peoples, their wisdom, their leadership for those who are also coming to look after and be custodians of the country, the land and the seas of Asia and Oceania.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, now we begin our prayer, and I just want to introduce to you Sister Joshita Kanamakal from India, who is a sister of Notre Dame and lives in Patna, India. As a Justice and Peace Coordinator, she is actively involved in the promotion of children's rights and the care for creation. As a Laudato Si animator, she is committed to making her province a Laudato Si province. Thank you, Sister Joshita. Are you there? If you could lead us in prayer now, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Creator of life, at your word, the earth brought forth flowers, bearing fruits. The rivers, mountains, minerals, trees, and forests sustained life. The eyes of all look to you to satisfy the needs of every living thing. And throughout time, the earth has sustained life. Through the planetary cycles of days and seasons, renewal and growth, you opened your hand to give creatures our food in the proper time. In your wisdom, you granted a Sabbath, a blessed time to rest in gratitude for all you have given, a time to liberate ourselves from vicious consumption, a time to allow the land and all creatures to rest from the burden of protection. But these days, our living pushes the planet beyond its limits. Our demands for growth and our never-ending cycle of production and consumption are exhausting our world. The forests are leached, the topsoil erodes, the fields fail, the deserts advance, the seas acidify, the storms intensify. We have not allowed the land to observe her Sabbath, and the earth is struggling to be renewed. During this season of creation, we ask you to grant us courage to observe a Sabbath for our planet. Strengthen us with the faith to trust in your providence. Inspire us with the creativity to share what we have been given. Teach us to be satisfied with enough. And as we proclaim a jubilee for the earth, send your Holy Spirit to renew the face of the creation. In the name of the one who came to proclaim good news to all creation, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Joshita. I'd like to now introduce to you, to those people who don't know, Jackie Raymond. Jackie is a co-founder of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, and she leads GCCM in Oceania. And just for those who don't know Jackie, and I'm sure many of you do, but for those who don't, as a co-founder of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, Jackie is involved on its steering group, numerous working groups, the Oceania chapter, and its co-chair of LISTEN, the Laudato Si International Scholars Tertiary Education Network. Jackie has worked for many years as an environmental educator at universities, TAFE colleges and secondary schools across Australia. And as Director of Catholic Earth Care in Australia, she developed partnerships and ecological conversion initiatives to enable the Catholic Church in Australia to better care for God's creation through advocacy, education, research and collaboration. She's been very busy. Jackie's also has been working with the Archdiocese of Brisbane to enable a system-wide response to Laudato Si. And just in her spare time, she's doing a PhD in education, researching integral ecology with a school community in the Kimberley. Jackie, thank you so much for all that you do. And please tell us and fill us in on all of the things that are happening in the next little while.
Thanks, Sister Anne-Marie, for that very warm introduction. It's my pleasure to also welcome you to this webinar today. Throughout this webinar, we're going to hear and listen to stories from the regions of Asia and Oceania. And I'd like to start by mentioning a little bit about these unique parts of our planet. Asia, as you probably know, is a continent in the eastern and northern hemispheres. It is located east of Europe, north of the Indian Ocean, and it's bordered on the Atlantic Ocean. Asia includes, of course, the Philippine Islands and Indonesia, and of the whole world's population, which is currently about 7.8 billion, approximately 3.4 billion live in East Asia. This represents 48.3% of the world's population. Oceania is a region made up of thousands of islands throughout the Central and South Pacific island groups, continental islands, high islands, and low islands. Many of the plants and animals that reach the islands from southern Asia during the last glacial period when the sea levels were low enough to allow for travel. And after sea levels rose again, the species on the islands adapted to the environment of that island. So they produced multiple species from a common ancestor. Due to Oceania's isolation from the rest of the world, it has an incredibly high number of endemic species, or species that are found nowhere else on Earth. As well as the interconnected relationships with creatures across Asia and Oceania, our unique biomes are connected through the wind and the seas, and the ever-moving currents of both of these that cause direct influence, particularly with our sea temperatures rising in Oceania, causing more frequent and intense storm systems, particularly to Southeast Asia. The true face of Oceania and Asia can be seen in the richness of its various cultures, of peoples, and of course the biodiversity. These are the beauty and its gifts. We know that our oceans are critical to all life on Earth because scientists have estimated that about 50 and perhaps even up to about 80% of the oxygen produced comes from the ocean. So our oceans are another great lung of planet Earth, alongside our forests of the Amazon, the Congo, and places like Papua New Guinea. We remember at this time the leadership of Pope Francis in the region of the Amazon and the call to listen, to integrate, and to enter into dialogue about what is happening in our world today, the current realities that we're all facing. This year, among and amid these crises that are shaking our world, we're being awakened to the urgent need to heal our relationships with creation and with each other. The year 2020 is going down in history as the year where we faced a global pandemic that caused all preconceived notions of safety, security, and health to be turned upside down. In that painful process, amidst the suffering of so many, we're also invited to see the deep connections between all of us as a human family and all of creation as an earth community. As a result, each person, family, community across the globe, and our organisational institutions, businesses and industries are being given the opportunity to discover new perspectives and discover new rhythms for living together on Earth. This really is a remarkable moment, and could be seen as a significant turning point in human consciousness and the way that we inhabit the earth. The year 2020 also marks the beginning of a significant decade. By 2030, we understand from science that we need to have made significant global reductions in our carbon emissions, or else we're committing the future of our children and their children to a life of climate chaos on Earth. This season of Creation 2020, during the pandemic, we're invited to realise that it would be a huge mistake to strive to return to what was once considered normal, because our ways of living and working were already causing unthinkable pain and suffering for so many people and for our beloved planet Earth. We're now being called to embody and embed gentle relationships and take much greater care for life, choosing to prepare the future right now. A committed path of non-violence and ecological conversion is being called forth. So the critical work ahead is to align our human systems of health, education, transport, production and consumption with Earth's natural rhythms of seasons and cycles and patterns of regeneration to bring about a better balance. This includes the importance of finding meaningful work and jobs for a sustainable future, governing with a model of care, cultures of peace being led by our leaders and by ourselves, and a much greater sense of global solidarity and intergenerational leadership. Regenerating rather than simply recovering from the pandemic. This year, the Catholic Church fully participates in the ecumenical season of creation, following the inspiration of Pope Francis. So I'm delighted to provide these opening remarks as we begin this webinar. Please notice that you're being invited to listen to stories, to bear witness to how to move forward together in Oceania and Asia, to demonstrate that this is a time of solidarity and also to shine a light on the just transition that we're being called to make. I'd invite you also to use the chat box as you're listening to each of these wonderful speakers so that you can place your questions there for Q&A later in the session. So I'd now like to hand back to you, Sister Anne-Marie, to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'll just share the screen again. And just to reiterate that when you use the chat box, if you, as you're listening to the speakers, if you can, and you have a question, if you can indicate who your question is directed to. So in the moment, we're going to hear from Father Jostrom. So if you have a question for him, just put Father Josh and then ask your question. And the Cheryl and others are collating the questions throughout the presentations, and they will send them through and send them forward during the question time. And as we have 4 or 5 key presentations, it would be good to know who your question is directed to. So just to remind you to do that. So we move, just got to, my, here we are. So we're now moving, and we're going to hear from Father Jostrom Carithodum. He was a Salesian priest and one of the Catholic Church's leading researchers on Laudato Si. And he's fondly known as Father Josh. He's the coordinator of the sector of ecology and creation at the Vatican Dicastery for promoting integral human development. He is also the chair of philosophy of science and director of the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at the Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. He was a research scholar at the University of Oxford, where he has been an academic visitor since 2011. His most recent books include Creation in Crisis, Science, Ethics and Theology by Orbis Books in 2014, The Philosophical Roots of the Ecological Crisis, the Cambridge Scholars in 2017, and the 10 Green Commandments of Laudato Si by Liturgical Press 2018. I welcome Father Jostrom to the screen and invite him to share with us his most inspiring work. Thank you.
Thank you, and hello from the Vatican. As I speak to you from the Vatican City, please allow me to bring you best wishes, greetings, and prayers from our beloved Pope Francis. Delighted to join you for this webinar, so congratulations to the organizers, and congratulations also to all those who are taking part in it. I've been asked to weave three realities: the season of creation, the just transition in the wake of the pandemic, and the special Laudato Si anniversary year that was announced by Pope Francis on 24th of May, 2020. I've been thinking for some time, what is the thread that weaves together the season of creation, just transition, and the Laudato Si Jubilee year, we might call it. And I think, I'm convinced, the theme, the running thread is precisely this concept of Jubilee, Jubilee for the earth. Now, when we were planning for the season of creation, a few months ago, the COVID was not on the horizon. And what we had in mind, we're aware that 2020 is a super year, and it's proving it to be on many counts. And it's the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. And as Pope Francis also said, last Sunday, we are recalling the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. Now, that was the occasion. But what really moved us was that the Earth is crying out, as we heard in Laudato Si, as the scientific community has been constantly warning us. And probably we are not, humanity is not yet fully aware of the gravity of the situation. We have the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, pollution, and we are on the verge of tipping points, the Greenland and the Amazon and the monsoon rains and the West Antarctic ice sheet. So the earth is really crying out. And along with the earth, as Laudato Si 49 says, it's always the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And it's also in Pope Francis' message for the season of creation this year that we are not living creation as a common heritage, as a common banquet table where everyone can sit, where we share Earth's resources. So the earth is crying out and the poor are crying out. And our children have been probably the ones who articulated most eloquently, most powerfully the cry of the earth and the cry of the children. So this is the reason we proposed the theme of Jubilee for the season of creation. Then came the COVID-19, the pandemic, which again, unfortunately, amplified the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. We know that pandemics like the COVID-19, we had SARS and MERS and Ebola and many others before. It's directly connected to biodiversity loss, to deforestation, to wildlife trading. Put simply, if the planet is not healthy, we cannot be healthy. So as the UNEP president said, it has been a very clear warning from nature that the earth is crying out. And again, as we saw, the poor are the ones who are paying the price. I mean, for lockdown, for some people is staying home. Yeah, our normal life is in some way affected. But for the poor people, it is a question of survival. So we need a jubilee for the earth, for all Earth's inhabitants. Now, this is the third thing I've been asked to connect. So that is the Laudato Si special anniversary year. So how do we respond to the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, all these crises put together? How do we respond to the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor that have been amplified with the pandemic? And we respond again with a jubilee year and this is not just 1 year, as most of you know. This with the Jubilee year, with the Laudato Si year, we are going to begin multi-year plans. Especially we have the 7-year plans, for example, that will begin at the end of the anniversary year and will go to the entire length of the decade. So what we are really wishing is the Jubilee that we begin with the season of creation gets extended, gets prolonged throughout the year and throughout the decade, and probably the only decade, as scientists have been warning us, as children have been warning us or reminding us, we have to save our common home as a livable place for humanity and for the rest of God's creatures. It's true that in the wake of the pandemic, governments have been coming out with the new Green Deal in the European Union, for example, very strongly coming out with it. There are efforts in the US, among other G20 countries. But I was telling myself, we have a deal, not just green, but with all the colors, with the red of justice, with the black of the earth, with the green of the trees, with the blue of the skies. And that great deal we have is the Jubilee. It was the theologian Moltmann who said, Jubilee was God's strategy to preserve the land and protect its inhabitants, both human and non-human. So the Jubilee year that we are proposing, and which we hope to live very, emphatically, very concretely during the season of creation. So Jubilee, the Laudato Si year, consists of several initiatives, several programs, of which the most important is the season of creation. Again, centered on this theme of Jubilee for the earth. And as I said, during the Laudato Si year and the Laudato Si decade that we hope to have, we hope to prolong this Jubilee through the multi-year programs. We have identified 7 areas, so almost everyone gets involved: families, our own schools, our universities, parishes, dioceses, hospitals, business and farms, and religious orders, that we begin a 7-year journey in integral ecology, following the teachings, the inspiration of Laudato Si. And we have identified 7 Laudato Si goals, thanks to our youth leaders from the Philippines. We managed to mimic the United Nations and propose, instead of the SDGs, or along with the SDGs, the LSGs, the Laudato Si goals, that we respond to the cry of the earth, that we respond to the cry of the poor, that we work on ecological economics, that we adopt simple lifestyles, that we work on the 2 pillars of ecological education and spirituality, and that all these we do together as a community. So this also, on this journey, what will accompany us is the concept of Jubilee. Here I would like to quote from the message of Pope Francis for the season of creation. I'm very pleased that the theme chosen by the ecumenical family for the celebration of the 2020 season of creation is Jubilee for the earth. And Pope Francis reminds us that in the Holy Scriptures, a Jubilee is a sacred time to remember, return, rest, restore, and rejoice. And this is a beautiful message, because it's a message that can accompany us during the season of creation. It's a message that can accompany us for the just transition that we need in the wake of the pandemic. It is Jubilee is what can accompany us throughout the Laudato Si year and throughout the Laudato Si decade we hope to have. A time to, Pope Francis tells us that Jubilee is a time to remember, that Jubilee is a time of grace to remember creation's original vocation, to exist and flourish as a community of love. We exist only in relationships. So we need to remember with this truth, remembering this truth, that we exist in relationships, only in relationships with God the Creator, with our brothers and sisters, as members of a common family, and with all of God's creatures within our common home. It's a time to return back in repentance, return back to the Creator with our fellow human beings, and especially to the rest of creation, to Adama, to the land itself. It's a time to rest, that we need to give Earth the rest it requires. And the current pandemic, Pope Francis tells us in the message, that the current pandemic has led us to rediscover simpler and sustainable lifestyles. So there is already a pathway for the just transition we need. That is by rediscovering a simpler and sustainable lifestyle. So we can have, Pope Francis tells us, the crisis in a sense has given us a chance to develop new ways of living. We can begin anew. And fourthly, it's the time to restore. It's the time to restore the original harmony of creation and to heal strained human relationships. We need to restore societal relationships, and Pope Francis speaks of ecological debt. And once again, he repeats the call to condone the debts of the poor countries. It's a time to restore the land. We need a climate restoration, and very strong words from Pope Francis. We need to restore our biodiversity. And probably the most powerful paragraph of the entire message is about indigenous communities. And Pope Francis says, we must restore with justice in mind. Indigenous communities must be protected from companies, particularly multinational companies that operate in less developed countries in ways they would never do at home. And as we know, the video message of Pope Francis for September is precisely on this theme, through the destruction of extraction of fossil fuels, minerals, timber, and agricultural products. And it's a time to rejoice. With this I conclude, because the Holy Spirit vulnerable in our midst. We see the gradual exciting journey awaiting us. So let's live this kairos, this time of grace, of jubilee for the earth and the poor during the season of creation, during the just transition in the context of the pandemic, and during the entire Laudato Si year and the Laudato Si decade. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much, Father Josh, and especially for reminding us what it is, what a year of Jubilee is about, this time to really stop and reflect. I just remind everyone that if you have questions for the speakers, that you use the chat box, and we'll refer to them later on. I would now, if Father Josh can stop sharing his screen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's all right. I'll share mine again. And I would like to now introduce to you, to those who do not know, Archbishop Peter Leuchong. I'm just waiting for my computer to catch up. Archbishop Peter Leuchong was born in Natovi, Tel Aviv, in the Archdiocese of Silva. Here we are. His father is a Chinese migrant to Fiji, and his mother was a native-born Fijian woman. In 1984, he joined the Pacific Regional Seminary, where he completed his priestly formation, and after his ordination, he served in parishes before taking up further studies in theology at the Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley. He completed his doctorate in 2012 and returned to Fiji in December that year, expecting to take up an appointment as a lecturer at the Pacific Regional Seminary. God had other plans. Almost immediately, he received his appointment as the future Archbishop of Suva. He was ordained bishop in June 2013 and then appointed as Archbishop of Suva, Fiji. Archbishop Peter Leuchong was elected as president of the Federation of Bishops' Conferences of Oceania in April 2018. He has spoken publicly and powerfully about the devastating effects of climate change on the ecosystems of the ocean and surrounding islands, particularly in the Oceania region. He has been very active in responding to Pope Francis's call in Laudato Si to live into the new paradigm of integral ecology. I welcome Archbishop Peter Lloyd Chong to your screens to share with us his wisdom for this moment. Thank you. Thank you, Archbishop.
Yes, thank you, Sister Anne. Yeah, I've been, if I'm correct, I've been asked to speak on this just transition for Oceania continent, and the aim of the session is for participants to learn how COVID-19 pandemic is affecting this particular region, especially in Fiji, and how it exacerbates the climate crisis, and how we can better support and advocate for just transition and recovery, and to be able to reflect on how faith can help us respond in solidarity to the current crisis. So Fiji has recorded 28 cases of coronavirus as of the 25th of August 2020, 22 of whom have made full recovery. And so now Fiji has 4 active border quarantine cases of COVID. So it's a small number compared to other countries. Some places like Tonga, Samoa, they have not, there's no record of a coronavirus than some other islands like Kiribati. But in Fiji, while COVID-19 did not affect a big number of people, the lockdown and the travel restrictions has had a major impact on the economy of our country, which is relies a lot on the tourist industry. So Fiji's economy, tourism contributes to nearly 40% of the gross domestic product, which is about 2 billion Fiji dollars. And so this affects about 150,000 people in the that work around the tourist industry. Last year, Fiji had more tourists coming into the country than the people that actually lived in Fiji. So we had 894,000 tourists. Our population is only 880,000 roughly. The bulk of our tourists come from Australia and New Zealand, and also from the US and other, but New Zealand and Australia are the big contribute a lot to our tourist industry. We've just had our budget, national budget, and the budget has announced a total of 640 million US dollars of new loans. That's that's about 1.4 billion Fiji dollars. Much of this debt will go to paying off old debts. As somebody said, we are borrowing from Peter to pay John. Really going into development. Yeah, so this will raise the total debt, Fiji's total foreign debt, to 8 billion from 6.7 billion. So it's now eight yeah. So in brief, Fiji's debt has trebled from 2006 to 2020 now. In 2006, it was 2.56 billion. Now it's 8 billion. So the future of the Fijian people has a double crisis: the climate change crisis that we are facing right now, and then this foreign debt crisis. So that's what COVID-19 has brought to the Fijian people. So while not that many people were affected by COVID-19, as I said, only 28 cases, and but it's the impact on the country's economy, and so this is a big, probably one of the big impact of COVID-19 into Fiji, and so it's going to add to the climate change crisis, this foreign debt. Now, just I'm sure this is might be repetition for some, but the studies on the research around the World Bank and IMF and their structural adjustment programs, they make the point that foreign debt is the reason of why many developing nations are in debt and poverty. So the World Bank and IMF Bank lend money to develop third world countries, and when we do not pay we cannot pay our loans, then the World Bank and IMF instructs countries to carry out a structural adjustment program, and there's a lot of academic papers written on this, and that is to adjust the economic development plans so that they are more market oriented and therefore able to pay the debt. And so the dynamics shifts from development to simply paying off the debt, and the banks, World Bank and IMF, through SAP, structural adjustment programs, recommends to third world countries to reduce government spending on essential services like health, education. We've seen that one of two hospitals being privatized here, and other sectors, public sectors being privatized, so that it cuts down government spending in order to then make debt repayment. And so literature on SAPs have heavily criticized that for many years are the cause of poverty around third world countries. In addition, SAP has increased the ever dependence of weak economic countries with weak economy to the richer nations, and so this is when you talk about transition in Fiji, and because we rely a lot on the tourism industry, and then what our country has done is go into what one of our parliamentarians said, that smart borrowing, so that we don't have to borrow in the future. But it looks like the writings and the study around this, borrow and continue to borrow, and that's why I really like what Father Josh of Pope Francis said about in Laudato Si number 50, about debt relief and this whole idea of the jubilee, which includes freeing people's debt, so that we can be given a chance to really develop ourselves. Just lately, I have been reading how do we get out of this, and Pope John Paul II makes this statement that policies governing structural adjustment loans are in direct contrast to the virtue of solidarity and hence unethical. And so how do we, this is a big challenge for us, how do we make this just transition from this COVID era to something that is more just, socially just, and ecologically just? I was reading this book, I don't know whether, it's called Another World is Possible. It was written in 2001, proposing popular alternatives to globalization at the World Social Forum. And they make some very recommendation for a new development strategy. The number one is the end to structural adjustment plan. Number two, to ensure the return of privatized sectors to public domain, and because that is the role of government, to be of service to the public. And when it's privatized, it becomes a business, it becomes market-oriented, and missing out on the service orientation that government should have. And then number three, to adopt a partly self-based development model. Then it suggests new rules for financial good practice, to regulate the financial market. That's something that we need to do here. Control movement of capital, eliminate tax havens. This is something that's happening a lot in Fiji now. A tax-free zone place that allows people to make companies to make business here, and then without even contributing to the local income. And so, yeah, that, dear friends, is what COVID-19 has brought in a nutshell. While it has not brought not many people are infected with COVID-19, it has a big impact on the economy, and will tie us down into another big crisis, and that is the crisis of foreign debt, which is part of the globalization dynamics. So, yeah, I'd like to end with that, and probably just COVID-19 has done what humans cannot do, and that is slow down globalization or reverse the world. And it has given us some space to really think about how we chart our world so that we will protect human beings and creation. So, dear friends, sister Anne, I think that's all that I have to share at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Peter, and especially for, I guess, throwing a highlight on those areas in our world where COVID may not be so vicious as a virus, but the impacts of it are being felt. But I think you also highlight those very important points about debt that many developing countries find themselves in, and this cycle of debt that they can't get out of. And for your point, highlighting in Father Josh's point of a year of jubilee, of cancelling that debt, and we can pray. I hope that can happen. So thank you very much for giving us the time today and for sharing those thoughts with us. Thank you. Now I'll just find the screen again, and I would now like to invite Bishop Alwyn de Silva to speak to us. Bishop Alwyn de Silva is in charge of the Justice and Peace Commission for the Archdiocese of Bombay and coordinator of the prison ministry. Bishop Alwyn was the Secretary of Climate Change Desk and Human Development Office for the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference, FABC. As part of his priestly ministry, he spent 21 years in the slums of Mumbai, where he was deeply involved in human rights issues, social concerns, and more recently in environmental matters at the local, regional, and national levels. Bishop Alwyn has co-edited, published, and presented a number of articles and papers. He is also the recipient of awards from Federation of Centres for Community Organisation, Bombay Catholic Sabha, Dignity Foundation, CPCI Award in Human Rights, World Peace Movement Trust, the Examiner Award for Journalism, and Golden Pen Award. We are most fortunate to have Bishop Alwyn speak with us today, and I invite him to share his insights about a just transition for Asia. Thank you, Bishop Alwyn.
Thank you, Sister Anne, for introducing me. And in the beginning, I would like to ask your forgiveness because the COVID-19 started in Asia. And I'm representing Asia at the present moment. And we know that what impact it has on the world. So I'm sorry for this virus, which most probably, I think, originated from Asia. The situation in Asia, some countries have not much of patients who have been affected, people who have been affected by coronavirus. Some countries are really affected. Like my own country, we have 70,000 people affected, sort of positive cases per day. And in some countries in Asia, there's not much of impact of this COVID-19. But I would like to begin first with how the FABC has responded to Laudato Si, the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference. Yeah, next slide. So, the story started in 2011 and 2013. Miserior partnered the FABC, and they started to tell us, do something about climate change, do something about global warming. And we were not very responsive. But then slowly we realized the importance of global warming and climate change. And therefore, in 2015, we established the Climate Change Desk under the Office of Human Development. And in preparation for COP21, and at the same time, we were fortunate to have Laudato Si, we had 4 regional seminars, and we tried to conscientize the bishops. We tried to conscientize priests and sisters and also lay people. So we had 4 regional seminars. Plus together, side by side, we had a research, what exactly climate change, what impact it has on Asia. The beautiful thing is from 2015, we tried to involve a lot of stakeholders. So we said how climate change can affect women, how climate change can affect migrants, how climate change can affect business people, how climate change can affect the family and the global social economy, how climate change can be introduced in our seminaries. So we tried to get the whole of Asia somewhat involved and to reflect on climate change, which was the result of Laudato Si. So we had a great inspiration in Pope Francis. It was a beautiful encyclical, which we used in spreading this message. We had a lot of publications and sort of handbooks. Okay, next. Now, what is the impact of the COVID-19 on Asia? I think it is more or less, it is a universal phenomenon, and it has impacted all of us. But I will just sort of mention what has been the impact of the pandemic. Yeah, next. So one of the things that has impacted Asia and also the other countries is the world has come to a pause. The world is in a pause. And we notice that sort of everybody's life is interrupted. It is across all ages, whether they are young or old or the youth. It has interrupted the food security. It has interrupted the education system. It has interrupted recreation. So everything has been impacted and altered. But one, I think you also must have experienced, but what I also have experienced is the equity of excess, which I will try to explain sort of later on. That we have realized, as the Archbishop said also, we have realized the injustice that is present in our system. And therefore, as Pope Francis has said, we need to examine and to prepare for our collective future. And this is what we have been doing. We have been reflecting in Asia and also in India, since I'm from India. We have been reflecting, what is this collective future? And because we'll have to reconnect to our real surroundings, contemplate the natural world, rethink our priorities and eliminate inequalities. So we have realized that the so-called normal is no longer sustainable. Next. So what have we to do? And in Asia, we have been thinking about it, that we'll have to pass from the old normal to the new normal now. First of all, we'll have to reconnect with our real surroundings. Because permit me to give you my own example. Since we are in a lockdown, I walk in my garden. And I'm reconnecting with the sparrows and with the crows and with the squirrels and with the birds. Once again, we are reconnecting with our real surroundings. And I think it's everywhere. And especially in Asia, where we have a lot of greenery and surroundings, we are reconnecting with the world. We are not only reconnecting with the real surroundings, we are contemplating. I think Pope Francis always invites us to contemplate on the natural world. And it has given a time to rethink our priorities and to eliminate inequality. So there is a time given to the Asian Church. And as you know, that the FBC, will be celebrating 50 years of its existence. And we are going to reflect now on this new world, on this new reality. Yeah, next. So what I call it in Asia is we are invited to a spirituality of alternatives. The past can no longer be followed, or it cannot be once again established. We have to think of the future. And therefore, we need a spirituality of alternatives. Yeah, next. So what is this spirituality of alternatives? Sitting here in my parish house, or people sitting in their homes, I've realized that there's no need to consume much. We can live with what we have, especially when we are not allowed to go out we can live with what we have, and we are happy. We realize that we haven't to go every morning, evening, go to work, come back from work, travel. No, there's no need to commute every day. We can work from home and be with our loved ones. We realize that not compulsively use of fossil fuels and airplanes. And we realize that, of course, we miss seeing places, but there is no need of tourism. Now, I think in Asia, but I do not know in other countries, we have a lot of programs where we can see the tourist spots and other things. So I think it's important that the domestic space is now possible for the encounter with the sacred. We try to run away from the sacred, but the domestic space is a possible place for encounter with the sacred. And this pandemic, though we should not have this pandemic, but this pandemic has shown that there is an alternative. Others, we thought that the world where we were living in was the best world. But we realize now, during the pandemic, that there is an alternative. And now we know we can live slower lives, closer to our families, our communities, to nature, and to God. And I think the Asian people are learning and are experiencing this new alternative. Yeah, next. So I think Pope Francis is sort of often, he has spoke about having compassion. As the Archbishop also mentioned, that we have realized that this world is not an equal world. It is an unequal world or unequal world. Like for instance, I have a large garden in my parish, so I can take a walk. But when I look at the people at the slums, they have no place to move. So there is an inequality. I have food in my parish house. There's a pharmacy next to my parish. There's no problem. But there are so many of people who don't have enough food. And therefore, this world is not equal. For instance, in many parts in Asia, but also in India, we have a new type of schooling, the online. But we realize how many of us have computers in our house. How many, of course, here in Mumbai city, we have our education in English. How many of our parents know English? How will they teach the children? So this inequality is experienced now in our lives. The second thing which we have experienced is the fate of the migrants. First time we realized, especially myself, that the migrants there were so many migrants in our city, and they were the people who were doing our work. Suddenly we realized during the pandemic that they were going home. Thousands of them. And during the past years, where were they? So a new reality dawned on us. The migrants, the trafficked people, and the marginalized. And another aspect that we realize is the older people. Suddenly in our houses, the domestic workers, we in Asia usually have domestic workers, they were not supposed to come to our houses, to our homes. And there the older people were sort of unattended to. So I think this has been a real shock to all of us. And we have to have a spirituality of alternatives. Next. Yeah, so during this pandemic, the FABC has been very active. especially the Office of Human Development. For instance, we began to ask the Asian representatives, what are you doing about this special anniversary which Father George spoke? We called him also to speak during a webinar. Then we called Cardinal Turkson also, who's the president of the Dicastery of Integral Human Development. We asked him also to speak, and we told the Asian representatives from different countries, share what you are doing about Laudato Si. And I was surprised that a number of countries have real plans for Laudato Si and also for the anniversary. And we prepared, the Office of Human Development prepared a booklet on Laudato Si week. We had a Laudato Si song, and hopefully we'll try to align and disseminate the 7-year plans. Yeah, next. So we are very fortunate that our president, Cardinal Charles Bo, is very supportive. And he has written a letter to all the Asian bishops and to priests and religious and to the others on the season of creation, the 1st of September. He has written a letter, which is, of course, we can't read it, it's quite small. But we have, he wrote a letter encouraging all the churches in Asia to do something regarding the season of creation. And then I think some of you must be knowing that there's a document, this Aqua Fons Vitae from the Vatican. And so we have taken this document and we have prepared a reflection for each day during the season of creation. And we have distributed it to the others. Yeah, next. So we are hopeful for the future. We hope that the Asians will live happily ever after, and we are still continuing through our awareness during the season of Lent. We are going to have a big musical of 45 minutes, trying to get the youth and other people involved. We have tried to spread the Pope's message. He had a video on the intention of this month. So we have tried to do our best, and hopefully we will have a just transition from the past normal to the present normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Alwyn, and thank you especially for pointing out those inequalities that that this COVID situation has shown us. But as you say, I think also the opportunity to encounter the sacred in our natural spaces in our world is one of the blessings, I think, that has come out of this, because God is always in everything. I think the other message I got and appreciated was your sharing with us all of the things that the Asia Pacific, the Asia area, the diocese, the work that they're doing in this area. So thank you very much for your presentation. I would now like to invite Dosia Bello, trying to, too far, to speak to us. Dosia is the co
We seem to have lost Sister Anne-Marie momentarily.
I'm back.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome back.
Yes, it just dropped out. So I'll share that screen again. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure Dush is in the wings ready.
Yes, I hope so. So Dershia is co-founder and vice coordinator of the Timorese Youth Initiative for Development, and she's also a Laudato Si animator. And just to tell you a little brief, she was inspired to do things in East Timor to raise awareness. And if for those who don't know, East Timor is a very small country, and Dersia knew that her home country of Timor-Leste had a problem. The smallest Southeast Asian island nation, which is largely Catholic, it should have been able to really take up the message of Laudato Si, but she didn't hear anything. Instead of sitting back and waiting for something to happen, she took action and she became a Laudato Si animator. And she has done some wonderful things. I invite Dersia to the screen to share with us her experience of living with COVID-19 lockdown and the importance of having a home. At least that's what I think she's sharing. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, my internet is quite bad here. Let me know if you guys don't hear my voice. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit broken, but we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the internet. Okay, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Dirce and I'm from Timor-Leste. I just want to share a story of mine, how I started doing environmental work in Timor-Leste. So I'm going to start this talk by sharing a personal story of mine. When I was 12 years old, I read a short story about a student's trip to rainforest on one of the educational local magazines. It described how students had fun, birds, and other wildlife. The story got me paused for several minutes, imagining myself in that situation. At that time, I somehow see my happiness in that situation. So I started thinking to go and see any forest in my country. During the holiday season, I've always asked my grandma to take me to my mom's hometown, which is in other municipalities in Timor-Leste and far from where I live. I lived in my dad's hometown, which is down to the coast, and my mom's hometown is up to the mountain. So we usually pass through the rainforest to get there. I couldn't imagine my feeling at the time passing through the rainforest. I don't know why, but my heart is always melted when I see the forest. The breeze, the fresh air, the birds singing always makes me wondering and thinking how beautiful that creation is. That was the time I decided to study environment. And the more I understand about the nature, the more I feel grateful for this beautiful God's creation. And I must confess that nature is my healer and I must take care of it. So in this current situation, COVID-19 teaches us how important home is. When any distraction happens out there, all we need to do is come back to our home. And this is same as our common home earth. COVID-19 also teaches us to slow down any human activities so nature can be healed and restored. It's time for us to sit and think about our production and consumption behavior. As Catholics, we have a huge responsibility to care for God's creation. This is a gift of God, we cannot say we love God and destroy His creation. As you know that we already have good laws and policies in place at the national or international. But I must admit that I think all of us must admit that we're like or fails in implementation. Therefore, my call for government is to reinforce the sustainable production and consumption. Make sure that the implementations are in place. Apart from the government, we also have the role to play, and each one of us can make a difference. So as individuals, as consumers, we also have the power to change the world by simply being careful in what we buy. And for the church, it's time for us, especially the youth, to take the action to lead the protection of God's creation. And remember, we live by faith. So every small counts. All it takes is one good person to restore hope. Obrigada. Thank you so much.
Derishia, thank you very much. Thank you for your inspiring witness to care for creation and for all that you are doing and that you have done. We will look forward to reading your speech because it was a little broken up, but we will make that available to people throughout the time. But thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us and your hopes. I would now gather all that we've heard and to listen to a song. This is a song called Protect All Life. And it was written for the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Japan, who released this as a theme song for Pope Francis's visit to Japan in November 2019. Creation, they said, is meant to be lived in. So to protect life, we must also protect the natural world.
So as Sister Anne-Marie
Yes.
cues that for
Thank
us, if you could just make yourself comfortable wherever you're sitting and tune in to some music, prepare your ears for that, and the visuals will come as well. Thanks, Sister Anne-Marie, for cueing that for us.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, it's just here. I'm just waiting for my
And while that's queuing, perhaps just consider what you've heard. This is a time of reflection. So remember the stories that you've heard, Father Josh sharing from a Vatican perspective, Archbishop Chong speaking about COVID in Fiji and the reality and what it means for so many nations in debt, and that double whammy that's hitting, the implications for people, for places. Considering what Bishop Alwyn shared for Asia, what you heard in his message, and Disha, really exemplifying the inequality just in terms of the internet connection. So reflecting on their spirit, the energy that you felt as you listened to them as well. And feel free to pop any questions in the chat box, because we will have Q&A after some reflection and a couple more speakers. We're going to hear from Father Edu, and also in the Philippines, and also Father Pedro Walpole will be speaking with us too. Not quite sure what's happened with the song, but I'm hoping it's coming on soon. I'll just pause here. So that beautiful music and message, as you know, was in preparation for Pope Francis's visit to Japan last November, and it was great to hear the Japanese in this webinar as well. I'm not sure whether Sister Anne-Marie is back with us.
I am.
Great. Welcome. We lost you, and I'm so glad you're back. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. And it's a very inspiring piece of music. And yes, so it's wonderful to hear. So hopefully you've been able to write your questions in the chat box, and in a little while we will we'll get to those, and I continue to invite you to write those questions. So I'd like to now introduce Father Edwin Garriguez. Before I do that, I'm going to try and share my screen again. And hopefully I won't lose you this time. Now, Father Edwin better known as Father Edu, is a priest from the Philippines, known for his social activism. Father Edu became a prominent figure against mining in the country when he led an 11-day hunger strike to stop operations of the Norwegian mining company Intex in 2009. His battle to preserve the culture of the Manganyan tribe, the indigenous people of Mindoro, won him the Golden Environmental Prize, the world's most prominent award for activists in 2012. Father Edu has led the Social Action Secretariat of the Philippines Bishops' Conference for 10 years, where he was the driving force behind several programs, including the Social Action Network COVID-19 response. At present, he continues his advocacy and his mission outside of the Bishops' Conference to defend the rights of tribal people and the protection of our common home. We welcome Father Edu to the screen to share with us his presentation on climate change and climate justice in the time of pandemic, the Philippines experience. Thank you, Father Edu.
Thank you so much, Sister Anne-Marie. Can I share my screen with you?
You can.
I'm afraid I cannot do it from my end.
So Cheryl may be able to.
For a while.
You found it?
No. I think I need to ask you to play it from your side.
So Cheryl, are you able to do that, or do you want me to?
We practiced it earlier,
I
but
can.
Thank you. There you are. Well done.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you to join you for this global solidarity. By the way, aside from working for the social action in the Philippines, I'm also one of the conveners of GCCM Philippines with Father Chan Laydon. So my presentation would really be focusing more on the Philippine experience and trying to underline how the issue of climate justice becomes even more pressing or relevant to the pandemic during this pandemic period, and how just transition is being pursued, particularly through the church initiatives. So that's the point of my sharing, so that I somehow the listeners can have a kind of glimpse or can find lessons to learn or from the good practices that we have, if we can find any. So next, please. As you know, Philippines has the record for the longest crackdown COVID cases, and this has a very destructive impact in the economy. And actually, the economic recession never happened in 29 years. It's only now that it's happening. And the contraction for the second quarter, as you will see in the next slide, will be really phenomenal. Can we have the next slide, please? It's not just a temporary slowing down of the economy, but as you can see, that's why I'd like to use the graphic or the visual slides. We can really see how the economy has taken a real nosedive, it's really a plunge to a negative value. And of course, this resulted to also in economic distress for the labor force. We have more than, they say, 23 or 27 million people that are now out of work. So this is really, the COVID has a very big impact in the lives of the poor in the Philippines. This is also happening not also in our country, but in many parts of Asia and globally as well. So next, please. And the challenge for us in the church, as our good cardinal posed in his message during Easter, to counter this pandemic, what we need is to spread another kind of virus. And he's referring to pandemic of hope, caring, compassion, and love. So this is a challenge for the church to reach out to the affected population, to the most vulnerable sectors of society, and he enumerated some of them: the farmers, the migrants, the refugees, the children, the elderly, people with disabilities, and the people who really they earn their living day to day, the daily wage earners. They really do not have anything to eat because they do not have work. So this is a big challenge for us. And next, please. We need to understand that this situation, this kind of crisis, this pandemic situation, is already, as Archbishop Peter also explained, this is already exacerbating or worsening the already existing climate vulnerability that we have. As we know, Philippines is most vulnerable countries in terms of climate impacts. And the pandemic crisis, we are already at risk, but the pandemic crisis adds up to the layer of burden for the poor and the most vulnerable communities. And this is happening as in our case, as in other countries in Asia as well. Next, please. Even before pandemic, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, they came up with a pastoral statement entitled "Hope in the Face of Climate Emergency." And it underlines, of course, so many of these concrete, doable action agenda for ecological conversion. But at the same time, what is also important in this pastoral letter of the bishops is how they also emphasize the impact of climate emergency for the poor. And I think when we talk about the poor population, I think this serves as the context or background for COVID response and for our climate emergency campaign. Because we like it or not, we accept it or not, there's already an existing social and inequity, as already explained by Bishop Alwyn, and a structural injustice, which constitutes pre-existing vulnerability for most of our people, particularly and most especially for the poor. And now the challenge for us is how do we respond? How do we respond to the continuing pandemic scenario? Next slide, please. Because this is not going to end in the coming months. That the pandemic will have its impact in the coming years to come. And how do we relate the pandemic crisis to climate justice campaign? I think one way to go forward is to emphasize the need to ensure food security. This is part of our climate justice campaign, that also part of our pandemic response. And this is very much part of mandate of Laudato Si, in terms of strengthening our agriculture for the poor to have food on their table. So ensuring food security is one important strategy. And secondly, next slide, please. I think what we need to understand also in a COVID crisis is that we need to find the root cause of the pandemic. In this Harvard research, it says that the cause of the problem, actually, the cause of the spread of infectious disease is actually the disturbance of ecosystem, particularly the habitat. So with urbanization and deforestation going on, so the disruption of habitat is continually happening, and that gives rise to the pandemic. So next, please. That's why we keep on saying, and this is one of our major campaign in the way we do address the problem, that we need to expand the narrative, because sometimes we just see or package the problem of pandemic in terms of health, in terms of economic impact. But actually, we need to emphasize and underline that pandemic is very much, the spread of infectious disease is very much part of the environmental destruction, the destruction of the ecosystem, particularly the habitat. That's why we need to highlight also the call of Laudato Si to care for our common home, particularly our to conserve our biodiversity. And this is very much part of the important message of Laudato Si. And how do we do that in the Philippines? Next slide, please. Inspired by Laudato Si, we have started a campaign for rights of nature. Next slide, please. This is actually a legislative agenda, a bill acknowledging the right of nature, that they have the right to thrive, they have the right to flourish, the ecosystem, they have the right to regenerate. I think this rights of nature is very much part of the constitution of Ecuador, and this is also in legislative policy of Bolivia and other local municipalities in the US. This is what Father Alwyn is saying, and we just want to put it into our legislation, that we need to retrieve the sense of the sacred for the earth. That the earth is not just a commodity. We need to understand, to retrieve that sense of sacredness when we encounter creation, and we want to put it into a law. And this has been filed already in the Senate and also in the House of Representatives or in the Congress, and we will continually we intend to continually push for this bill in the coming months. Next, please. And for the agenda of just transition, what would be our priorities? Next slide, please. One of the problems that we have in the Philippines is the proliferation of the coal-fired power plants. Since 2010, it's there in the data, 60 new coal power plants started operations. This is all over the country. And now we have a total of 28 existing coal plants in the country. And they are continually expanding. And this is a big problem for the Philippines and even in Indonesia and other parts of Asia. So part of the campaign that we do in the church is the withdrawal from coal. Next slide, please. And this is part of also of the agenda that we have in the CBCP statement. One of the important action points for us to withdraw to divest from coal, because there are churches and congregations who are themselves investing, sometimes without them knowing it, because they have their own treasurers. The investment had been there for so many years already. But this is one important campaign that we have even for the church, and not just to withdraw from coal, but to divest from coal, but at the same time to invest in renewable energy. Next, please. And this is very much a part of the call from Laudato Si 165. Pope Francis is very much categorical in saying that polluting fossil fuels, we need to get rid and replace it without delay. So we have this campaign along with our civil society organization counterparts. Next, please. And what we dream as part of the just transition is to achieve the 100% renewable supply of electricity, of energy. This is really far from being real. We know this is really very far from reality, particularly when you consider the present situation. But this is a goal for us, so that it will also help in terms of economic relief and recovery from pandemic situation, and as a kind of potential in generating green jobs. Next, please. And the church has to walk the talk, as we say. The Vatican recently praises one of the Philippine dioceses for adopting the solar energy. It's the Maasin Diocese. But actually, Maasin is just one of the many dioceses trying to solarize, to use solar panels as a renewable energy source for the convent, for the schools, for the parishes. There are many more. And we work with Wichin. Wichin is a private company, and they provide us with technology and also financing scheme for us to be able to afford the renewable energy. So this is very much part of the church campaign in many of the dioceses. Next, please. And also because, as we already mentioned earlier, because of the proliferation of the coal-fired power plant, we also have grassroots campaign against coal at the diocesan and even at the parish level. And even the youth are very actively participating. Next, please. And in the Philippines, we have so many of our civil society groups. So we utilize, we maximize the convergence with the other cost-oriented actions for renewable. So these are locally led campaigns, not just for, among the church members, but also together or in partnership with civil society organizations. We call this eco-convergence in many parts of the country. And we have done this in many parts of the Philippines, but because of COVID, we have to stop because of our constraint and limitation in terms of mass gathering. So, I think there are so many things, next slide please, that I can share about the Philippine campaign, but we are very much limited in time. What can I just say to you? What I can just assure you is that we in the Philippines Church, we are with the Holy Father in really pursuing the agenda for the implementation of Laudato Si, to protect our fragile ecosystem, to also to campaign to address the ecological crisis, and because we believe that this is very much part of our Christian duty and our Christian responsibility. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Father Edu, and how wonderful all of these things that are live. Laudato Si is in the Philippines, and so much work that you're doing. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your presentation. We move on now. And I'd like to introduce to you Father Pedro Walpole, a Jesuit, an Irish Jesuit missionary in the Philippines. He holds a doctorate in land use change from King's College in London, and he's a practitioner in sustainable environment and community land management in Southeast Asia. Father Walpole is the founder and research director of Environmental Science for Social Change, ESSC, a Jesuit group in the Philippines using scientific data on the environment to advocate for change aimed at making poor communities less susceptible to natural disasters. He is also the coordinator of Reconciliation with Creation for the Jesuit Conference of Asia Pacific, JCAP, and the coordinator for Eco-Justice Global, an international communication and coordination network of Jesuits and partners on ecological issues. We welcome Father Pedro and thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that's visible to people.
Yes.
Good afternoon. It's been a long afternoon for people, so thank you for staying with this. I suppose as I begin, outside with Pope Francis's message that every crisis contains both a danger and an opportunity. The opportunity is to move out from the danger. Many of us in Asia, from where we are not investing. We don't have money to invest. And as Father Edu is saying, and others, the effort is very much in terms of retrofitting, going solar, and these are the appropriate responses where we're not actually caught in the investment paradigm. Let me quickly go through a number of points I have here, which for many of us are going to be a reminder. And for maybe the 250 people who are out there connecting with us, it's really trying to find one of these points, one of these connections that helps us move forward, that helps us connect and generate a further network in this time of COVID. So divestment is a strategy. Participation in an occasion of change is what's most important. So find how to participate is crucial. So as we go through the points, latch onto something there and say, okay, I'm willing to do more, or I want to do more, or learn more in this area. These PowerPoint, these images will be shared with you. I'm not going to read them to you. Divestment has a very important message in terms of the relationship to human rights. We're finding many of the human rights globally are impacted by bad investment decisions. And I think we have to be very clear that under this time of COVID, many inappropriate corporate development actions are going on throughout the Amazon, but also throughout Asia. Divestment also connects really with the common good. And we really need to seek in our societies a greater common good. Climate, obviously connected to the divestment efforts, is a common good and needs to be sustained as such. The importance of the Amazon, the importance of other lungs of the earth, as envisioned in Corrida Amazonia, are very important. Now, the ecological dream of Corrida Amazonia is not an infatuation with reality. Dreams are visions when they are shared by community. Dreams are very important in much of Asian marginalized society. I live with an indigenous community here in Mindanao, and the collective dream is what guides people. So we need to care for our forests, and through this process, of which again the Pope has stressed how important indigenous peoples are, we need to come together with these different indigenous visions of a world and understand how humbly, hopefully, and joyfully in this jubilee to move forward. Climate change represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity, and it poses a great threat to human dignity and rights of present and future generations. So again, I'm stressing more the importance and the dialogue that must go on in divestment. IPCC's report of 2018 really racked up the problem, and then we've moved on to other problems. We cannot forget climate change as a daily concern for so many in this time of COVID. A just transition entails transformation in business, mainly the fossil fuel companies. Shell, Exxon, Mobil, all of these have to come back into focus, and they have to help us. They have to help the world make the transitions that are necessary. And this goes through a process of accountability that many of you are aware of. Young people are leading in the action, the call for climate action, and we must join them and work with them in these engagements, in the UN COP process, and many of the other national processes that have stalled in part, but which need to go forward. There are two institutional questions that we need to continue to ask, whether a church institution or business. Is there an investment policy that reduces exposure to carbon-intensive companies? And are we including resolutions to move away from these carbon-intense investments? And it's rubbish for companies or institutions to say, well, this is difficult. No, there are processes. In the 60s, when it was agreed to divest from corporate warfare, nuclear, that process can be made very clear. So we need to work with that. We need to lead by example, and we need to do more. So one of the things that's highlighted there is the next fossil fuel divestment announcement is in November 16th. Can we get behind that and continue to communicate it in our church communities and our organizations beyond? So very simply, helpful sources, and I will send the links for these afterwards. One is Pope Francis in June talks about the journey, and there's a manual. So if you could help make that manual more useful, that would be great, and use it in your own context. Laudato Si goals, as already mentioned, are very important platforms to sustain this movement forward. We've got to keep acting, so as to move forward. Seattle University, just to remind us that universities, and this is a particular reminder, I suppose, for Jesuits, we've got to get in there and make a difference in terms of fossil fuels. And if the importance of this, if they really have a schedule laid out, they really have a process and all of the elements that need to be checked and worked with. Church of England has really shifted its investment. We can also learn and engage with them. So I feel that ethical investment is something that we can study, learn from, and promote. The same applies to the church in Sweden. This is the Nordic dynamic, Lutheran dynamic, which again shows how a faith community can move forward and stop this polarization that's there. Sometimes there's too much polarization. People don't want to get involved. We've got to understand the fear that people are in, but positively move forward and engage. German Protestant Church, the same. Look at the ethical, sustainable divestment. Maasin has already been mentioned, many others. For those of us who don't have great investments, yeah, let's invest in our energy, alternative energy systems. And let's share that, help others to see that into a small solar system, whatever. We need these examples, we need these stories. Philippine bishops has been heard already. They're heeding the call for divestment and they're looking for convention already. Worth looking up and seeing how churches are doing it. And again, we come back to both what Bishop Alwyn has been talking about and others, FABC's climate change initiatives. There are many there. So I'm really pulling these points together. Let me finish. I am sure all of us are connected today, who are connected to this discussion are involved. So we're preaching to the choir in a way, but we need to stretch to do more, and particularly not allow this time of COVID take us away from a central concern that's connected with COVID. So we need to pay attention to climate change, and many of us cannot avoid it, but we need to bring it to the fore in our social and church community discussions. So we need to find further basis to organize, both at the local church level and to share the experiences with parishioners. I feel a lot more we can still do in the Asian context to share and invite communities to be involved and not to try to reduce the politicization and the marginalization that goes on. So conversion, if you like, is the first step. Church communities embracing others, sharing the voice with the youth, and keeping track of the financial systems. Like Archbishop Peter was saying, we have to make a shift in these financial systems to get the transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Pedro, Father Walpole, for a most inspiring presentation and really challenging. It is challenging to try and divest. And I know that there are many institutions and religious institutions who are making an effort to do this. And the work of the Eco-Justice, the Eco-Jesuits is very helpful in this situation. So thank you. I'd like to quickly, we're swiftly running out of time, but we're about to move into a question and answer time. And this is where your questions that you've been putting in chat box will be directed by John Din and Jackie Raymond. So John is a Colombian lay brother and a national coordinator of GCCM of the Philippines chapter, and he's based in Manila. So I hand you over now to Jackie and to John, and they will direct your questions and answers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sister Anne-Marie. And John, I'm just wondering if you've got the first question ready to go there.
Yes, I have. While the talks was going on, there were a couple of questions that was raised already in the text box. I think just read the two of them. the first question is, how is Fiji affected by the sea level rise? And then the second question, again, this is to Father Josh, was on like, how is the church going to observe the Jubilee this year? That's the first questions that came out in the chat box.
So let's start then with the question for Archbishop Chong.
Yeah, sea level rise is definitely, the sea level is definitely rising. You can see the marks of that along shorelines, you know. But the ones that are really affected in Oceania are atolls like Kiribati, Tuvalu, no mountains. So already, like Kiribati has bought a big piece of land from I think it belongs to the Anglican Church in Fiji's second largest island, where the relocation is set up for relocation. So for sea level rising is really a real matter for atolls like Kiribati and Tuvalu and those low-lying islands. So definitely that's a reality. We have a school ground just outside here that's we noticed that it's becoming swampy. So it could be that just that the sea level is rising underneath the ground. Added to that is sea level rising is a slow progressive thing, but there are other things that are happening that are making a straightaway impact on people's lives, and that is extractive industries. Let me mention one. There seems to be a big demand on black sand, and they say that it is good raw material for making steel. So these issues are making a direct impact on people's life, the exploitation of nature. So for example, there is a village where the women depend on catching crabs to make life, and they sell the crabs and then make a living out of that. But because there's a Chinese company that's extracting black sand, that has affected the crab population, the ecosystem. So the crabs are no longer there. So you talk about the progressive sea level rising, but we have also to address the extractive industries that have an automatic impact on the ecosystem and the balance and the food security and economic sustenance of people.
Thank you for your extensive answer. That was a great response in sharing what's happening with sea level rise and a whole connection back to industry and business. Thanks so much. The second question is for Father Josh. Father Josh, how is the church going to respond, or how is it currently responding and observing the Jubilee year?
Yeah, I would say at least 3 levels. First would be the season of creation, and we managed to get the theme of the Jubilee year. And the webinar we are having is also to celebrate the season of creation, create greater awareness. But I would also like to emphasize the fact that from the last couple of years, the season of creation has become very ecumenical, and there's something very, very commendable. So the one way we try, and this year we have the theme of the Jubilee for the season of creation. So this will be the one level. The second level is with regard to the pandemic, and the Vatican has created the COVID-19 Commission. And as all of us are aware of, and also very grateful to, Pope Francis is giving moral leadership to the world. You know, he has spoken a number of times. Some of his words came on some of the slides. And of late, he has begun the catechesis. And today, his catechesis just got over. And last week was on caring for our common good, and there's the previous one on vaccine being available to everyone. You know, beginning with the poor. So he is really leading it. And he has insisted again in the message for the World Day of Prayer for Creation, the season of creation, the need to condone debts, and not just philanthropy. He said it's because the North has exploited the South, so it is a question of justice. It's the wider context of the ecological debt, foreign debts as of now, and he said all the more urgent due to the health emergency and all the situation we are living through. So in the wake of the COVID-19, the church, thanks to Pope Francis, third level in which church is celebrating the Jubilee, and that's our real dream, that the Jubilee that we begin with the season of creation doesn't stop till we really heal the land, that there is no limit. That the entire anniversary year, but the entire decade, and then that's the reason we purposely chose the 7-year journey and the 7 Laudato Si goals. And as Father Pedro Walpole, it's all on our website. Said the third one, for example, is very concrete on economy, or the second one, cry of the earth. The first one, the cry of the poor, education. So it's all very concrete. So our real dream and for the church, and then again we are trying to, first of all, this year to get Catholic communities to get started on this 7-year journey, beginning with our own families and schools and parishes, and dioceses and business, religious orders. Then we very much hope to do, and we are already negotiating or dialoguing, a better word, with other ecumenical partners and also with other religions. Because the whole dream or the strategy is this: sociologists tell us that if we get 3.5% of a group, we can have the critical mass and change can come through. That's how slavery was abolished. That's how very recently, a few decades ago, the Berlin Wall came down. And so that's the next this year and a couple of years are very important, that we create the critical mass. But also keep this in mind, for societal change, we need something like between 21 to 25%. So networking is so important. I'm so glad that also working at the Vatican, we see, and as Pope Francis put it in his message for the season of creation yesterday, we see a movement of people, and he said the Holy Spirit is inspiring a movement of people from below and from the peripheries. And when that is being done, it is a clear sign that God is at work, when it is from below and it is from the peripheries. So the church is celebrating the Jubilee with the season of creation, during the entire pandemic, how long it might take us, we don't know, and during the entire decade. And I repeat, as our children tell us, the only decade we have. So it is a long Jubilee journey, but lots of hope, lots of enthusiasm, lots of good examples around the world. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Father Josh. And leading into the 7-year plan is really a movement on the ground to respond to that. So it's incredibly exciting that the COVID-19 Commission work leads into that for all of us. That's such a great invitation to that question. I'm just looking at the time and thinking it's moving, and we might, whilst we have many other great questions, we might move now to the papal video that came out. I think that was something we wanted to share with everyone before the closing prayer with Sandy. Is that right, Sister Anne-Marie?
Yes, we were just wondering if we, because of time, do we still want to show that? But yes, I'm happy to do that.
It's very short. It's an hour.
Okay, good idea.
Minute and a half. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Perfect. Can you see that?
Yes.
Can you see it now still?
Yes, full screen. Thank you. It may have frozen. Sister Anne-Marie, we may have lost you. This happened last time. I think it's too much for the system at work. The technology is straining. So perhaps while she's coming back, I'd like to just invite a huge thanks on behalf of everyone who's been involved. Oh, here we are.
Estamos exprimiendo los bienes del planeta, exprimiéndolos, como si fuera una naranja. Países y empresas del norte se han enriquecido explotando dones naturales del sur, generando una deuda ecológica. ¿Quién va a pagar esta deuda? Además, la deuda ecológica se agranda cuando multinacionales hacen fuera de sus países lo que no se les permite hacer en los suyos. Es indignante. Hoy, no mañana, hoy tenemos que cuidar la creación con responsabilidad. Recemos para que los bienes del planeta no sean saqueados, sino que se compartan de manera justa y respetuosa. No al saqueo, sí al compartir.
Thank you, Cheryl, for backup. And we now move to our final prayer together. And I invite Sandy Cornish from Australia. Sandy is a practitioner in the field of Catholic social teaching, and she's very well known for her work in many areas. Sandy, for brevity, can we hand over to you now for this final prayer?
Thank you. Our hearts and our minds are very full, so let's bring ourselves home to God. And we'll begin in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Loving God, creator of heaven and earth and all that is in them, you created us in your own image and made us stewards of all your creation. You blessed us with the sun, water, and bountiful land so that all might be nourished. Open our minds and touch our hearts so that we may attend to your gift of creation. Help us to be conscious that our common home belongs not only to us, but to all your creatures and to all future preserve it. May we help each person to secure the food and resources that they need, be present to those in need in these trying times, especially the poorest and those most at risk of being left behind. Transform our fear and feelings of isolation into hope and fraternity so that we may experience a true conversion of heart. Help us to show creative solidarity in addressing the consequences of this global pandemic. Make us courageous to embrace the changes that are needed in search of the common good. Now, more than ever, may we feel that we're
all interconnected and interdependent. Enable us to listen and respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. May the present sufferings be the birth pangs of a more fraternal and sustainable world. Under the loving gaze of Mary, help of Christians, we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sandy. Jackie, I just realised that you have a few announcements. Do you want to go back to those?
Well, the good news is that Cheryl has put them in the chat box, which is fantastic. And I think Pedro did a great job talking about the divestment campaign, which is so important. But perhaps I'd just like to add a word of thanks to Cheryl Dugan, all her work in putting this amazing webinar on and working so hard at holding it together with us all. So thanks to our speakers, obviously, and over to you, Sister Anne-Marie, for the last word.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And I just add my deep gratitude to everyone who has put in so much time and effort, and the speakers for your presentations, and for the thought and the inspiring challenges that you've presented us with. And I especially like to thank all of those participants who are still with us, but those who have joined us today, and thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for your questions. I'm sure we will make them available somehow, and ask you to keep watching this space and join the season of creation throughout the next month for the many different opportunities that are there for you. So thank you again. Thank you for being here and taking the time. And we wish you a blessed night or day, wherever you are, and that this season of creation might bring us hope, especially at this time. Thank you.
We protect とに歩くこの旅路を
何度もくじけて諦めそうになるけれどどんな坂道でも震えた夜もいつかたどり着く光が差す方へ同じ時の中ただ一度の人生で君のために祈るぎゅっとつないだ手を二度と離さないで
Thank you.
Thank you. We stop recording.